We're continuing Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, the halachot of Bet Knesset, discussing Kedushat Bet Knesset, Siman Kuf Nun Aleph, still towards the end of Seif Aleph, and of Lamed Bet, Amud Aleph of the regular prints of Mishna Berura, and we learned how Maran of Bet Yosef writes that in Bet Knesset and Bet Midrash is asur to eat and drink. But then Talmidei Chachamim v'Talmidehem, Lomdei HaTorah, people whose job is to learn Torah, their focused hours during the day to learn, they are mutar to eat and drink when it's considered extenuating circumstance, because if the alternative is for them to go home, to go outside, walk, bitul Torah, haval al zman, and therefore it's mutar for them to eat if there's no other place. And the Ramah says, there are those who say, and seems to be that the Ramah paskins like this opinion of the Ran right there in Masechet Megillah, that holds that Bet Midrash is even more kal, which we have to study now, because that's almost oxymoronic, as we will see in just a moment. But the Ran holds, and the Ramah paskins, that when it comes to Bet Midrash, even if it's not considered extenuating circumstance, even if you have a coffee room next to the Bet Midrash, like nowadays, Baruch Hashem, we're blessed to have, most of the shuls have an outside room that you could go eat and drink. Still, says the Ramah, you could bring your coffee inside the Bet Midrash, sit with your sefer and have your drink and learn, even though that's not midochak, even though that's not extenuating circumstance. So how do we understand that? Says the Chafetz Chaim in Od Chet of Mishna Berura, after Kedushat Bet HaMidrash Chamura Yoter Mit Knesset, we're going to see in just the two short Simanim, in Siman Kuf Nun Gimal, that really Bet Knesset and Bet Midrash, which one is holier? People think Bet Knesset, Chas v'Shalom. Bet Midrash is Kodesh Kodashim, the Makom shemegadelim bo Torah. The Gemara says, Miyom shenechrav Bet HaMikdash, from the moment that Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, you know where the focus of Shekhinah is? You know where the concentration of that Kedusha rests? Only in Bet Midrash. Arba amot shel halacha, surrounding the people who learn Torah. The Gemara says this in many places. The Gemara says it, of course, in Masechet Brachot, Masechet Sukkah Daf Kavchet, Masechet Chagiga Daf Tetzayin, Masechet Brachot, in numerous places, that when you learn Torah is fire. The Gemara like says by Yonatan ben Uziel, right? Gemara says this in Masechet Sukkah Daf Kavchet, that when he learned Torah, afilu of poreach me'al rosho, miyad nisraf, there was a fire around him. Gemara in Chagiga speaks about Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua learning together. That's a fire. Zohar HaKadosh, in the beginning of the Idra, the holy Idra, it says that Rabbi Shimon and his friends sat to learn that the entire house was engulfed with another iron dome, but a fire dome. It's the Torah. It's the Kedusha of the Torah is what we have. So therefore, Bet Midrash is much holier than a Bet Knesset. Even though the Bet Knesset, it says, in the Gemara in Megillah that we just learned, and based on the pasuk in Yecheskel Anavi, that Vahilaim the Mikdash Be'at, that Hashem says the Bate Knesset Shebebavel in Chutz La'aretz, the Bate Knesset are like a miniature sanctuary of a Bet HaMikdash. They have its tremendous holiness, but Bet HaMikdash is even holier than that. So it says the Ramah, even though that in Siman Kuf Nun Gimal we're going to see that Bet Midrash is holier than Bet Knesset, but still there is a built-in leniency of a kula that you could, if you're Talmidei Chachamim v'Talmidehem, Lomdei Torah, the people who are occupied by learning Torah, they could eat and drink in Bet Midrash, no problem. Why? Says the Chafetz Chaim, Sevira lehu de le'inyan chachamim v'talmidehem, the Ran, who the Ramah paskins like, holds that the Lomdei Torah, the people occupied by Limut Torah, shelomdim sham b'kviut, that they are set in the Bet Midrash, learning the whole day. Hitiru lahem afilu shelo midochak. Chazal were not heavy on them. They let them even shelo mitochak, not to be mebatel them, not to stop them from learning Torah, tell them to go eat or drink a coffee outside, a hot tea or a hot coffee. It takes 5 minutes. The 5 minutes, 5 minutes of Torah every second of it. It's tremendous. So therefore, Chazal, we're not specific with Talmidei Chachamim. You can learn as you're eating and drinking inside the Bet HaMikdash. Mishum de Bet HaMidrash hu beto, because Berabanan, the Gemara says Berabanan, Beta de Rabanan. Bet HaMidrash is called Berabanan, the house of Chachamim. They live there. Talmid Chacham is learning 18 hours a day and goes home for a few hours to rest. Where does he live? It is the Bet Midrash. So therefore, it's considered something that's mutar for them. Chazal were never specific about them. It's not just eating and drinking. It's the same thing is with doing their other things. They could take a rest there as well. We spoke about this before, and again, we mentioned that according to Mishna Berura, even hanging out, so to speak, in Bet Midrash, it's asur l'tiyul l'tayel, asur l'tayel, says the Shulchan Aruch, for Talmidei Chachamim v'Talmideihem would be mutar, no problem, right? Same would be for being mekashet themselves, taking care of themselves in that way, and so on. But the Ben Ish Chai is a little bit more mahmir when it comes to these things. Ben Ish Chai says those are not extended necessarily to tiyul and so on. It's just for eating and drinking, and again, perhaps will be things that are extensions of eating and drinking. We spoke about smoking, for those who hold smoking is mutar, right? And probably getting some rest if they're tired, they want to put their head down for a moment to rejuvenate their kochot to be able to learn. So that becomes a little bit of a machloket. The Ben Ish Chai seems to be more specific and stringent, even for Talmidei Chachamim, not to be hanging around. To learn still a decorum of Bet Knesset. Just because you're a Talmidei Chacham doesn't mean that now you get to spread yourself out and to cross your legs and do whatever you want. It's still a decorum for Bet Midrash that they have to comply with. But for Achila v'Shtiyah is a specific heter that Chazal gave for them not to have to waste their time. So says the Mishnah Berura, of course, the Levush, the Bach, many of the Achronim, they side with the Ramah over here, but the Yodea, of course, we have to be mindful that according to Maran, Shulchan Aruch is not so simple, because Maran does not differentiate. This is only Midohak. So therefore, it would seem to suggest that according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, Shekibalnu Oraotav, that we are bound to his psakim. If you could do it outside, do it outside. That's what it would seem from the psak of Maran. Now, the Mishnah Berura says, "V'chen nireh she'en le'achmir la'anashim shelomdim shal kol hayom." Mishnah Berura says not just for Talmidei Chachamim, even if you're a Baal Bat. But in Ben Azmanim, Baruch Hashem, lo nitenu Shabbatot v'yamim tovim la la'asuk b'hem b'divrei Torah. Right? You have Shabbat and Yom Tov, everyone becomes Talmidei Chachamim. They're learning Torah. What are you going to do? Go sleep on Shabbat? Okay. Arizal says 2-3 hours of sleep on Shabbat. But the rest of the time, you're going to be learning, right? Or Sundays. What do you do on Sundays? The Sfarim HaKadoshim write that HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges a person based on themselves. So a person says, I want to learn Torah all the time. The Gemara says in Masechet Brachot Avav, חשב לעשות מצווה ונאנס ולא עשה, מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו עשה. If you want to do a mitzvah and it's forced out of you, you can't do it, you can't afford it. Hashem considers as though you did it. So a person says, I want to learn Torah. Chaval, I have to work. Otherwise, I would be sitting here 12 hours, 16 hours a day, we'll be learning. Hashem says, oh, really? Let's look at your Sunday schedule, right? What time do you daven on Sunday? Do you daven nets or do you daven at 9:30? Hashem Yerachem, right? Rahman al-Islam. So that, and how many hours are you learning, right? So a person that's learning Baruch Hashem and Ben Azmanim is learning on Sundays well, only heter for Talmidei Chachamim, says that the Mishnah Berura, no, it's heter for anyone that's learning for hours and hours and hours in Bet Midrash. You don't want to be mebatel, mutar. Mutarim lachem, mutarim lachem, mutarim lachem. It's not just for Talmidei Chachamim, but it is for anyone pretty much that wants to learn and wants to connect themselves with the thing. So now, the Ben Ish Chai, even though the Maran Shulchan Aruch seems to be mahmir, surprising heter from the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai says, anyone that's learning, we're learning for hours upon hours in the Bet Midrash, for them is mutar to eat and drink in the Bet Midrash, even if it's not midochak. They could do it even shlo midochak. And this is a psak that Ramor Eliyahu brings it as well. This is, by the way, something that Ben Ish Chai writes. And it says he explained it more in his new Sefer Mekaf Tziel. You have to look, now that they have the Mekaf Tziel, you have to take a look inside and see if you could find this in the Halachot, in Parashat Vayikra, in Saif Hey, brings this halachah, this leniency, paskening like the Ramah, and the Kaf HaChaim also writes that you could be lenient. But Chacham Ovadia writes that you cannot differentiate between Bet Midrash and Bet Knesset, and all of it, both in Bet Midrash and in Bet Knesset, the heter is only midohak, because Maran Shulchan Aruch Shekibanu Oraotav is mahmir. So this comes out like V'na'apochu. Chacham Ovadia regularly is more mekel over here. Says no. Maran says you have to be mahmir shelo midohak. And the Ben Ish Chai and the Kaf HaChaim, well, Ben Ish Chai seems to be mekel more across the board, and the Kaf HaChaim says this only for Batei Midrash, which again would be like kolelim nowadays, versus a Bet Knesset that is also used as a Bet Midrash. Because nowadays we don't have necessarily separate entities. In Batei Midrash they also have a minyan, and in Batei Knesset they also have a Bet Midrash. So really it depends on what's the ikar. Right? Ikar, we'll discuss this when we develop this a little bit more, but for today we're going to suffice with this. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll pick this up, we'll continue in the days to come. Chazaku Berura.